Andrew Carnegie was one of millions of immigrants to America. Scottish-born, not a cent to his name, without education, Andrew Carnegie was the least likely person to help fuel the makings of Greater America, putting America's name on the map economically, socially, and politically. Andrew Carnegie was born on November 25th, 1835, in Dunfermline, Scotland. 3 decades of odd jobs with little pay finally paid off as Andrew Carnegie invested some of his earnings in the iron industry. However, he would, in short time, build his empire on the successor to iron, steel. Carnegie Steel would indirectly allow his charitable side to donate most of his earnings to better the American economy and education system. However, getting there was a perilous road. For one thing, the Bessemer process, which was the first cheap industrial process for the mass production of steel, was introduced to the United States by Andrew Carnegie. Demands for this new steel grew and paved the way for American railroads to be faster and carry more weight. Carnegie had been doing well. The same thing could not be said for Carnegie's workers. For Carnegie's workers, the steel factory was a living hell. One of Carnegie's workers would later recall, "Sometimes a chain breaks and a ladle tips over, and the iron explodes. Sometimes the slag falls on the workmen. Of course, if everything is working all smooth and a man watches out, why, all right, but you take it after they've been on duty 12 hours without sleep, and running like hell, everybody tired and loggy, and it's a different story." Was the exploitation of workers a mandatory part of the greater good Carnegie had done for America? Was it really necessary? These exploited workers weren't going to silence the matter anytime soon. June 30th, 1892, marked the beginning of the Homestead Steel Strike. To make up for ungodly hours, Carnegie's workers demanded higher wages. What started off as a simple, minor disagreement ended up becoming one of the most serious battles in U.S. labor history. This is where Andrew Carnegie's robber baron versus captain of industry conflict comes into place. Andrew Carnegie was publicly pro-labor, but in his private hours allowed Henry Clay Frick, a public anti-union supporter, the right to do whatever it took to silence the strike. The time is 10:30 p.m. in Pittsburgh on July 5th, 1892. 300 Pinkerton detectives took up arms. The cost? 10 men were now dead, and 70 men lay injured. Was it the right and responsibility of Andrew Carnegie to take better care of these men? Or was it Andrew Carnegie's right and responsibility to boom America as a nation? The answers to both questions cannot be yes. Andrew Carnegie's legacy lays conflicted. Were these workers more important than America as the greater good? Or was America prioritized first? Historian David Nassau and economist David Surdum have two different perspectives on this matter.
He believed that the future of American society and the future of the American people would be better if he was allowed to take all this money and then to spend it on behalf of the larger community. He said at one of his speeches, in which workers were present, it was the opening of one of his libraries. He said directly to them, to the workers present, he said, "I know you would have liked it better if I had less money to build libraries and you got larger wages." He said, "But the community is better off with libraries and concert halls that I can give them. And if the only way I could make that money available was by working you guys hard and keeping your wages low, in the end, more people profit from that." And I think he really believes that.
He was taken aback by what happened, and I think he was somewhat naive with respect to workers. And naive not in a particularly benign sense, but naive in the sense that I don't think he understood the worker, what they were looking for.
He believed in peace and he gave to the Carnegie Endowment for Peace, and he spent the last years of his life talking about peace, and yet there was still World War I and World War II. So yes, he changed history, but not in huge, huge ways. I think the world might have been different without Andrew Carnegie, but not hugely different.
Our economy has evolved, probably for the better, and instead of relying upon heavy industry, we're now relying on services, a lot of high-end services, the legal, creative. We export a lot of movies, music, a lot of culture, and we avoid those horrible jobs in the steel factories, those horrible jobs in the packing plants to some degree, and people now are working in much more pleasant situations. So my guess is that to some degree he was a product of his time, and maybe if he was alive today he'd find some other industry that he could understand and he could learn how to run efficiently. He may well have been able to.
Well, the most significant difference is that Andrew Carnegie never believed that the money that ended up in his pocket was his to spend on himself or on his family. He believed, unlike any of the other millionaires of his era, and most millionaires today, that he had gotten this money as what he called a trustee for the larger community. In other words, he knew that all the money that went into his pocket had been made by the thousands and thousands and thousands of people who worked in steel mills, who worked mining iron ore and coal, who worked transporting the raw materials to his steel mills and transporting the finished products elsewhere. Looking at robber baron is a phrase that emphasizes the negative. Captain of industry is a phrase that emphasizes the positive. But they both describe men like Andrew Carnegie, who are great industrialists. That's an interesting question. There were lots and lots of rich industrialists in Europe, but because the American economy was expanding so much faster, the magnitude of Carnegie's